Sunday. Yeah, it is final Sunday of the US Open, and Nick is back. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Anastasia. I mean, yeah, it is final Sunday. Yeah, I do find it weird that we always end up recording before the final.
Yes. But, time zones and all that, so we just have to go with the flow. What I thought I would do is we will record this, but I will come back in the future. So I'll edit in a little bit of a snippet of who the men's winner actually is. And it'll be seamless. Well, it won't be seamless. You'll totally know because I'm telling you now. It'll be edited in at the end.
You could cut this bit out and then edit that bit over the top.
And just be like, it's whoever.
Yeah. But
but no.
Insert player's name here.
Insert player here. We are coming. You know what is it? We could say all the nice, cute, flowery things and just leave the name blank. And and
then just let's get AI our voices Jannik, Sinner, over.
Taylor Fritz. But yeah, so we're coming to you at about 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So the men's final has not happened. It is going to happen later this afternoon. And this is going to be our US Open review. And we will also, of course, talk about the phenomenal match that happened yesterday against Jessica Pegula and Aryna Sabalenka that gave us a female champion at the US Open. But let's start with our little review of the tournament. I am here in New York, so I was able to go for a few days in person. Nick is watching from home in the UK, so different time zone. So we'll give you our thoughts on what that was like watching from home, going to the tournament in person, and maybe a little bit of tips and tricks for next year. But I think also we'll talk about this at the end as well. Nick was able to do something really cool for our website and write a little guide to the ballot for Wimbledon, which we'll talk about at the end. And maybe I will do something very, very similar for the US Open for next year. So everyone is ready and prepared.
I definitely think you should, because obviously based on what our last episode, when we discussed the last episode, and I was asking you all kinds of questions about visiting the US Open and sort of tips and tricks for that and being on site. And then you said it was sold out. Yeah, I would say we need to start sharing that sooner rather than later. You need to start planning your trip now, whichever Grand Slam you're doing. If you're doing both, good luck to you. But you definitely need to get prepping right now. And Anastasia, you are perfectly kitted out for this segment. If any Instagram viewers get to see your wonderful new US Open hat. So you gave us our kind of advice on how to navigate the grounds in the last episode and things to look out for. So I guess, was your experience sort of what you expected, pretty standard for the US Open? Or was there anything new that you spotted?
Well, I think going into this US Open, I didn't know if last year was a blip. Last year, 2023 US Open was electric. I had never seen those many people on the grounds before. It was packed all the time. I think Frances Tiafoe was coming in as a star. We didn't know Coco Gauff was going to win yet. So I didn't know if that sort of level would stay. And I was pleasantly surprised that it did. Tennis is alive in America right now. The grounds were packed all the time. They broke records every day. But I think then what that means is things have to change a little bit, because if this is the new vibe, if this is what the US Open is going to be in the future, and based on this US Open alone and all the American talent that we had, I can only assume that tennis is going to become even more popular in the States, which means the US Open will become even more popular. I just think something needs to be done about how they handle the crowds on the ground, because there were some days where it was so crowded. Like it wasn't even about like being on a court and watching the tennis, because once you're on there, it's fine. But just getting from one spot to another, lining up to try and get some food, it was very difficult at times doing that. So
I was going to ask you about that, actually, because I'm glad you brought it up. So I think the last couple of years, there have been certain personalities in the media on Twitter who are saying that, oh, they're selling too many grounds passes and they're letting too many people in. Personally, I'm like, great, pack the place out, because that's what it's for. That's what you should be aiming for. We want as many people watching tennis as much as possible. But is there a structural capacity problem with the US Open that they need to fix?
Yeah, I think, and you know what? I actually don't think it has more to do with capacity, because I am all for ground passes and please print more of them. It's great. What I think is happening is a lot of people have become wise to the idea of, oh, I could buy, an Ash ticket in the 300 level and actually just never go to Ash and just, be on the grounds, because that's where, believe it or not, the fun matches are happening. I understand what Ash is for. Ash is the big, stadium. It's the marquee location. But the way it's scheduled right now and the structure they have, it's like there are 2 matches in the morning, 2 matches in the night. And a lot of times for the first week, it was straight sets. It was just straight sets. They were done early. There was no true excitement I felt on Ash, and all the action were on the outside courts or Louis Armstrong or grandstand. And I don't know if they can mix up the scheduling a bit, or in that case, create a method of making the upper bowl level kind of like it is in Louis Armstrong and also grandstand. So the lower bowl is ticketed, but once you go to the upper bowl in Louis Armstrong grandstand, it's general admission. Do they need to do something like that for Ash? Maybe it's after a certain time. I don't know. But I think it's all about alleviating the pressure on the grounds, because that's where everyone is, mostly because they can't get into Ash. And Ash in the first week does tend to have some room and capacity to get more people in, I think. I felt this especially on the one day that it rained at the US Open in the first week. In the first week, I can't remember what day it was now, but it rained. And I remember Paula Badosa was playing on Louis Armstrong. And Louis Armstrong was the only court that people could get on with general admission tickets. And it was the only roofed court that people could get on with general admission. So what happened then was everyone, obviously it's raining, there's no matches on the outside. So everyone needs to get to Louis Armstrong. And the line was bananas. It went all the way. If you know where the grounds are, the line started at Louis Armstrong and then snaked its way all the way to the fountain, which is in front of Ash. And that was one of the longest lines I've ever seen. But it was valid because people wanted to watch tennis, and the only place they could was Louis Armstrong. So when things like that happen, you think, well, I'm looking at images of Ash and the upper bowl is, not full. Could we maybe also, release spots in there for general admission? I don't know, during the first week at least. I think it would help the situation a lot. There is talk and thought of, oh, well, they'll just increase prices and I just don't think that's the answer, because tickets already are so expensive. And here's the thing, people are willing to pay it, and, capitalism wins, and that's just how the economy works, demand and supply, you know what I mean? But take, for example, today is the men's final, and a standard ticket, and this is not resale, but a standard ticket. So there's in Ash, there's a 300 level, which is all the way up top. There's the 100 level, which is below that. Then you have the sort of clubhouse, the sort of like the suites that people do. And then there's a lower level. Now, the level right under the 300 level, it's great viewing for tennis. I think really that's where, if you want to watch an Ash, you should go view from the 100 level. And tickets in that section are going for $1,000 standard, over $1,000 standard, not resale, standard. For one match, because there's only one match happening today, and it's the men's final.
And was that the price of the ticket before we knew who was in the final? Because I know there's dynamic prices in play.
Yes, that was the price before we knew who was in the final.
Okay, I just need to do some quick exchange rate calculations. Because
Nick is getting out the calculator. And while he does that, I will continue. But, so that prices out so many people from watching the tennis live. And it was very similar to Aryna Sabalenka and Jessica Pegula yesterday. So definitely some things have to happen, I think, in the general structure of the ticket prices for the US Open, and also how to, in some way, alleviate the pressure on the grounds. Because I don't know if it's sustainable, if we can do another year of this.
No, I don't think it is. So just to confirm for maybe British listeners, but also just so I can process this, $1,000 US is £761 in UK pounds. Now, just for reference, that is just over double the price of a ticket for a Wimbledon final. Genuinely, you could buy 2 Wimbledon final tickets for less than one Ash 100 level ticket.
Yeah.
And when I say 2 Wimbledon type final tickets, we're talking the good tickets as well.
Wow.
So
yeah,
that gives you an idea of the difference there, and why I feel like a trip to the US Open for me would probably require me to have won some kind of competition before I even consider doing it. And Indian Wells might actually be more affordable.
Yeah. So, prices at the US Open have gone up, and you're talking to someone who last year watched Coco Gauff from those same seats in the hundreds. And yes, the tickets for the women's finals are cheaper than the men's finals, but not by much. But last year I watched Coco Gauff win in that section for about $450. So there was a lot of demand, and they raised the prices.
Because I was like, what was the men's final ticket? Because that was last year. That was Djokovic Medvedev.
That was in the 600s. I think it was between $600 and $700 for the men's finals ticket.
So there's been a just dramatic increase.
Yes. Yeah.
Dramatic.
Dramatic.
Okay. Look, we're here to kind of promote people going to go see live tennis and be a fan and watch. And we don't necessarily want to kill that, but it's, this is people listening to this going, well, hang on, this sounds really expensive. How on earth am I going to do that? And, my answer is always going to be trust your ground pass first week. That is the time to go.
That is definitely the time to go. And so they're doing something special this year. So by the way, ground passes are available every single day of the US Open, including into the second week. What happens into the second week is the prices dramatically drop, obviously, because there are hardly any, matches going on the outside, especially on the last day. There's nothing happening on the
And especially this year, because the wheelchair tennis players are in Paris for the Paralympic Games instead of the US Open.
Correct. Exactly. Correct. So this year, what they're doing is they're having a fan party, is what they're calling it. So you can get onto the grounds of the US Open today for $25. They have all the big screens around so you can watch the match live from the grounds. And then afterwards, they're having a DJ. I think it's Galantis. He's going to be playing some tunes in Louis Armstrong, and they'll just turn it into sort of like a dance party event after the tournament, after the final.
The honey juices will be really flowing.
Oh, honey juices will be abundant. But I think it's another way for them to get people on the grounds. Obviously, you can get your 23. Can you imagine? You buy a ticket for $25 and then you go buy a $23 honey juice.
Yeah.
But people will. And so they're trying to make, I think, the last day because before what would happen is you would come to the grounds and then just watch the match and then that would be it. But I think they're trying to create some sort of event as well, maybe have a little dance party and like do all of that stuff. I think, when the winner is wins his match or whatever, they bring them out, they have an interview right by the fountain with ESPN. So all of that is there for all the fans to watch live. Aryna Sabalenka did hers yesterday. So there is stuff to do. But just don't think coming to the US Open is cheap. It's not.
No. And let's face it, it's like we said, I don't think it is. If you go to an event, even if the gate prices are vastly different in some cases, everything on site is still going to be costly.
The same.
It's going to be a similar situation, whatever sporting event you attend, to be honest, to a certain extent, but especially in tennis. If you want a cheap day out of the tennis, go to a Challenger or a 250. Yeah. Which, hey, I would always recommend doing that anyway.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed this year because I think I've been to, other tournaments, but I think this was the year where I really did venture out and go to a lot more tournaments outside of just the US Open, which is a Grand Slam. And it's been really nice doing that too. And being at smaller events, it's great. But I don't want to sort of dissuade people. The US Open was still fantastic. I think my favorite part of the US Open is still the free fan week. It's completely free. I think if you're planning ahead and you really want to get the vibe, go watch qualies during the free fan week, see all the top players on the big courts really up close. I just don't think you can beat the value of fan week at any tournament. Like you just get so much for free. Yes, you go to the grounds and you still have to buy your honeydews and all of that stuff. But in terms of just being there and experiencing tennis and the grounds and all of that, fan week is the way to go. Also, the first week of the Grand Slam was epic. Yes, ground passes are now it kind of fluctuates. I will say the lowest amount is in the second week. And then during the first week, it does get expensive during Labor Day weekend, which is when obviously a lot of people are off work and they're coming to the US Open. But you do get a lot of tennis in that first week. So you are paying, yes, $150, $170 or so for a ground pass, but you are getting ticket from, 11 a.m. till whenever the tennis stops, which can be really late sometimes on the grounds. And it's just a great vibe to be on there and enjoy it. So if you're saving up and you want to go, I would say free fan week and the first week, it's the time to be there. It's definitely the time to be there.
Yeah. Definitely go check it out if you can. If New York's relatively easy for you to get to, you could plan a trip for a few days in 2025. Which, judging by this year, is going to be potentially packed, especially given how well all the Americans did again this year. TBC on if any of them win a title, but certainly they're all in the mix.
Yeah. Before we start getting into the tennis, what was it like watching from home for you? Because unfortunately, and this happened last year too, and I think it's planned that way. But this year, a certain cable provider in the United States was in a dispute with Disney, which owns ESPN. So for a certain group of people, it was really hard watching the US Open on TV. There were workarounds and stuff like going directly to the ESPN app and things like that. But ESPN owns the rights in the States, and that's how we watched it here. But how was it watching for you in the UK?
Well, UK is pretty good on the whole. I mean, probably a little bit behind in terms of I did find out the results a little bit after most of the rest of the world. But I had choices of whatever court I wanted to watch on my app that I subscribed to get it. Like, that's Now TV, which is a subsidiary of Sky Sports, who own the rights. And I could very easily navigate around and like flip between which court I wanted to watch, which match. I wasn't restricted to just watching Ash or Armstrong or anything like that. I think it felt the same as a lot of other Grand Slams or previous years at the US Open, where you sort of watching, you get an idea of the vibe. I definitely think the vibe in the outside courts was better on the vibe in the inside courts on the main stadiums. Like, there was I've seen a lot of conversation about the atmosphere on Ash coming across on TV as being a little bit more subdued, and everyone finding that a bit weird. I think that picks back up for the women's final. But that's just something I don't generally pay attention to that because I'm paying attention to the tennis. My usual struggle with watching tennis in my time zone is obviously I have to sleep through the night sessions. I did try to watch the night session that had Swiatek Pegula followed by Sinner Medvedev. I fell asleep after the first game of Swiatek Pegula, woke up as the crowd was going crazy for the start of Sinner Medvedev, and I was like, well, hang on, I'm going to turn this off so I can find out what happened in the previous match. Again, and then basically just ended up drifting in and out of Sinner Medvedev. It was just impossible. Like, on a work night, it just wasn't realistic for me to attempt. It didn't go well. So I probably missed quite a lot of the US Open, to be honest, because I wasn't able to watch too late. It's great experience for me coming home after work. I can stick the tennis on, and I've got a whole evening of tennis, unlike Wimbledon, where that's not always guaranteed. Usually wrapped up by like 9, unless it's a really long match on centre court. So that's the one thing I do enjoy about the US Open. But yeah, from watching it, I mean, yeah, I think it's probably kind of very similar to watching the Australian Open for me, but very sort of different time zones, obviously, because Australia is first thing in the morning, and actually there's way more tennis than that Grand Slam.
Yeah. Okay, now to the tennis. First of all, just looking back, in general, I would say there haven't been a lot of matches that have been like, whoa, I'm going to remember this, 4 years from now. And we're going to be like, oh, remember 2024 US Open? There haven't been a lot of that for me. But has there been any match for you that maybe stuck out a little bit this year that you would maybe remember or carry on? Or has it just been maybe just a quiet year, 2024 at the US Open?
I will say this, again, referring back to my previous statement about time zone troubles. So what I'm currently doing is I'm kind of like monitoring how crazy social media goes for certain matches, more than anything else, like beyond my own assessment, because I will sit back and enjoy a lot of matches. I thought Marta Kostyuk against Emma Navarro was a fun match. but hardly anyone on social media was talking about it. But I thought it was a good quality battle between the two of them. That's a match I watched. I thought was good. Zhang and Sabalenka at the start of the tournament, I really enjoyed. I didn't watch any doubles. I didn't have time. I watched as much as I could. I think Shelton Tiafoe was a lot of fun. That was definitely a lot of fun to keep up with. But if I'm thinking about all the matches that kind of everyone made a big fuss about, I slept through all of them. So I woke up and I'm like, Osaka Mukova is ended up being straight sets, but that's a match that a mutual friend of ours was a big fan of, even though it was straight sets. I woke up to everyone going crazy about Zheng Qinwen and Donna Vekic having their rematch of the Olympic gold final, and everyone was talking about that being the match of the tournament. I was like, slept through it. And it's not the same when you go back and watch either, because you just don't get the same impact because you know the result. Part of the joy of tennis for me is in the tension of not knowing the outcome. So really, I'm only going back and watching it to make an assessment of the quality, which isn't as fun. So yeah, you can kind of get the drift. Like there were 2 days when I woke up, checked my phone, and I think my neighbours were wondering what on earth the cries of surprise were. After setting,
you're like, what happened?
What happened? Like, no, he's fine. It's just the tennis. And of course, those were the days where I woke up and I saw Carlos Alcaraz was out, and then Novak Djokovic was out. So yeah, you can see kind of where I'm going with this. So I'd say, I think the match I'm most likely to keep talking about is the women's final, partly because I was paying a lot of attention to it. I do think that finals tend to be, especially among fans, the kind of matches where you go, oh yeah, I remember that one. Like, obviously it's the championship match. That's the one that matters the most. But yeah, because I think if I lived in New York, Anastasia, I could probably be listing off a lot more matches going, this was great, this was great, this was great. But this is the problem you have with the co-host that you have chosen.
Yes. But, weirdly enough, I did have a similar experience to you because it's just a busy time for me at work. So if I wasn't on the grounds, it was really hard to pay attention to the tennis that was happening during the day. So I also didn't really see a lot of matches that people maybe were talking about. The ones that I did watch that I might remember all happened in the first week at night on a tiny court because they went long. The crowds were going crazy. And for me, that's what watching live tennis is all about. Sometimes it's the mix of great tennis happening on the court, a lively crowd that can maybe sometimes even change, the results of a match. Three of the ones that I remember specifically were Zuzi Bergs and Kotov, which was just fun. He did bring the party for that one match. I think he was out in the next round. Eubanks Rindignesh was wild scenes, and I think also that's another thing about an international event like the US Open, because in that sort of match, you would think, okay, all the Americans would be there, which they were. But guess what? All the French people were there too. So it was just a battle. It felt like a soccer match. And then Musetti Kecmanovic, which you think at first, you're like, well, people barely know who Musetti is. They definitely don't know who Kecmanovic is. How could this be a lively match? But it was incredible. It was on court 5. It was incredibly packed and a fun time. You wanted to say something.
You know why it was a lively match? Anastasia, you underestimate how many people listen to Ground Pass. They know exactly who those people were because we've been telling them all about Musetti and Kecmanovic.
You are right. It is our influence. You are welcome, ground passers. But yeah, so those were like the great matches for me. And then in the second week where, I don't know, this was a very weird tournament of a lot of straight sets and a lot of early upsets, I think, of players that people would have thought would maybe have a chance of winning the tournament. All the action were the doubles. I remember watching the 2 stories I was really following in doubles well, I guess one story I was following the whole time, which is Taylor Townsend and Donald Young, because Donald Young is retiring this year. This is going to be his last tournament. And I remember being at their first round match thinking, oh, okay, this is like a really nice, cute thing, cue the flowers. And then they won. And then they got to the final, so that was a really, really great story throughout the tournament to follow. But then I remember being on court for Venus and Skupski's doubles match against Nava and Boya, and they were wild cards in the tournament, and they were this close. You can't see me, but I'm holding my fingers really close together, this close to beating Skupski and Venus, and they didn't get through, but it was so fun watching them.
Just to be clear, you mean
doubles in person.
Just to be clear, you mean Michael Venus, the male doubles player,
Michael Venus, yes,
not Venus Williams.
Yes. Oh yes, not Venus Williams. Sorry, I was going for the last names. Not Venus Williams. She did not play in this tournament. But yeah, it's just watching doubles players interact with each other and like pump each other up and like give their hand signals. And it's a really great experience watching in person, something that doesn't always translate on TV, which is why I'm really interested in this mic'd up experiment that the ATP had a while ago. Cause I think it actually, based on this tournament and watching it in person, I feel like mic'd up doubles might actually be a thing. Because that was so fun being on court, hearing them do their little signals and, they're like here and here. And I don't know, it made it more exciting to see them work together as a team. So I think maybe mic'd up doubles has a future, but that was it for me. I don't think there's going to be any sort of 10 years from now, we're looking at the 2020 US Open for a legendary match. That just hasn't happened yet. I don't know. We still have the men's finals to get through, so we don't know. But so far, they've been good matches, but I don't think any great matches.
I think that's fair. And, sometimes you get years like that at the US Open. I mean, to me, regardless of how some results have gone, no US Open has quite lived up to the hype of 2021 for me, especially on the women's side. But that's just more maybe my taste. Maybe there's a little bit of nostalgia with it. But then actually 22 in the men's event was pretty exciting, mostly because of Carlos Alcaraz. So I guess it kind of had like not everything's going to be blockbuster, but like there were still some good matches, even if they weren't like memorable. And I mean, let's face it, I don't know if I can name a match from 2023 US Open that's kind of legendary in that sense. I can name results, but maybe not matches. 22, different story with Sinkaraz and that epic encounter that they had that kind of dwarfed everything else. Or Swiatek beating Sabalenka in that semi-final. But yeah, it's you have quieter years at some slams, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that because it's still good tennis.
Yeah, no, it's still totally good tennis. I will say this has been the year of American tennis. American tennis made big, big strides at this US Open. And I think, if anything, that's what we'll be taking away from 2024. There's been talk from the beginning of Andy Roddick, and, everyone's just sort of counting down how many years since it's been since we've had a male American tennis player in a Grand Slam final. We finally have one this year, but that's not the only American story. It was like you were in the second week of the Slam and there were still so many Americans around. And I also, more than any other year, watched a lot of juniors this year, and there are tons of Americans in the juniors too. And all you're thinking is like, oh, I can totally see them a few years from now playing in the main draw, even though some of them did play in the main draw, which was, I didn't know. Did you know this was a thing? I was actually quite surprised. So for example, two Americans, Kaylin Bigun, who won the French Open juniors, and Eva Jovic. They played mixed double. Yeah, they played mixed doubles in the main draw, and they got to the second round or third round. And then I think some double. I think Tara Grant was also someone who played qualies for the main draw. So I was actually surprised that you could do that, like in the same tournament, be in the main draw either in qualies or first round, but also play in the juniors. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
But I noticed a few players do that this year.
Yeah, no, I remember that. So this is going back a long way. 2009 Wimbledon. There was a player called Laura Robson who maybe newer fans might recognize as a commentator now, and one of the, I would say, best commentators in the game at the minute. And she, at the time, was 15. So you can tell immediately that she's one of those players who, like, injuries just wrecked her career after looking super promising at a young age. She won Wimbledon Juniors aged 14 in 2008. And then that meant that, the hype around her was such that Wimbledon gave her a wild card into the seniors in 2009. And she still played the juniors draw. I think she got to the semis that year.
Wow.
So it was weird. Like, yeah, I remember, like, I was still a very early tennis fan. I'm actually the same age as Laura Robson. But I'm thinking, well, if she won the juniors last year, wouldn't that mean she beats the juniors the following year? But juniors do not work like that. And that was so that was something that was worth. So that was something that's bearing in mind, is that they can play in both, and Eva Jovic played in both. I mean, I didn't know she was in mixed, but she was in the US Open women's singles as well, and she gave Ekaterina Alexandrova a real run for her money in round 2. There was a genuine point. I was like, oh my gosh, this 16-year-old's going to be playing Aryna Sabalenka and Arthur Ashe. Like, that was actually a realistic prospect. Jovic is the only player I actually junior player I watch, because I don't tend to watch juniors because there's just way too much tennis to follow.
Oh yeah.
I cannot spend all day watching it, unfortunately. But Jovic, I was very, very impressed by just how much power she has at 16. That it's insane. It is insane. The fact she was kind of keeping up kind of toe to toe with one of the biggest hitters in the women's game right now is probably a scary sight for anyone who's going to wonder how big she's going to hit it when she's 21. So that's, and like the fact that she then lost in the semi-finals to a Brit whose name I actually don't know how to pronounce.
Me neither. I was hoping you would, but her first name's Mika.
Yeah.
So I think that's easy.
The first I heard of her was her beating Jovic in the semi-finals. That was the first time I'd ever heard of her, and of course then she wins the event.
Yeah. So I only watch juniors during Grand Slams. So
I don't think you can watch them outside of Grand Slams, to be honest.
Yeah, you know what's I think they are streamed. So for example, on the boys' side of the juniors, there's this kid, Matthew Forbes, who won Kalamazoo and then got, a wild card into the US Open. He was someone who I could watch his match, but it was like a stream of some nature, kind of how you watch challengers and stuff. But yeah, there's some availability, but yeah, no. There's actually a Netflix show about juniors in the States when it's the Orange Bowl is a tournament.
I've heard of the Orange Bowl.
Tournament.
Like, it's a very prestigious. So, it's pretty much a level of a slam in the junior world.
Right, exactly. And there is a Netflix series following juniors trying to go qualify and then play in the Orange Bowl.
Do we need to do a juniors episode?
We should do a juniors episode. We're going to add it to our list. We're going to do a juniors episode. And I will link below in the show notes description the Netflix show. Because I think it was actually pretty popular, but, there's too much tennis and I don't have time to watch everything. So I haven't seen it yet, but I will put a link in our show notes. Okay, so, that was the US Open. We have a women's finalist winner. Aryna Sabalenka did it.
She did it.
She did it. Finally, finally, because she's had a few tries at this, and it's always been it seemed like it was this hurdle that Aryna Sabalenka couldn't get over, but she is finally a US Open champion.
Yeah, she's been getting a step closer almost every year for the last 4 years. 2021, semi-finals. Loses to Leylah Fernandez in 3. 2022, semi-finals. Loses to Iga Swiatek in 3, being a breakup in the 3rd. 4-2, I think. And Iga comes storming back. 2023, gets the final by her skin of her teeth against Madison Keys, only to then basically find the one player who could get her ball back in Coco Gauff in the final.
Yeah.
So this year, she finally did it. Jessie Pegula, her opponent, did not make it easy, though. 7-5, 7-5 does not do the score justice. Pegula could have won that in straight sets. It could have gone 3. Both players deserved to win both sets to a certain extent, but Aryna was the one who basically decided to make the most of the opportunity when it most counted in that final, and it was a great sight to watch. Her finally winning a US Open, and if you're only interested in the stories at the top of the game, we're in a fascinating situation at the top of the WTA now, where it's now game on for world number 1 at the end of the season. Swiatek versus Sabalenka when we go through Asia and we go to the WTA finals. I think Sabalenka's very much been the star of this tournament as well. Obviously, a lot was made of her from day one almost, when she met her mini-me in the crowd, which I sent to my mum, and she was just all over that. If you haven't seen it, it is utterly adorable. This girl in the crowd is wearing the same kind of dress design as Aryna, same colour. She's got herself a temporary tiger tattoo on her arm to match Aryna's. She gave Aryna a sort of soft plushy tiger thing.
It
was adorable.
So cute. Yeah, it was really, really cute. And I will also post the link. I think the US Open posted the video of it, and they did a little photo together. It was the cutest thing. And, I think the thing about this final was, first of all, it was a great match. My goodness, do the boys have something to live up to today, because that was a great tennis match in general. And they both fought for it, but in different ways. I think, by the way, this is a repeat of the Cincinnati final. So they literally just a few weeks ago met in Cincinnati in a final, which Aryna Sabalenka won. I think that was when Jessica Pegula coined the Aryna Serena Sabalenka nickname for Aryna. And, coming into this final, I think Jessica Pegula really did bring it to Sabalenka. They had just met in a final. I think she just did really well, and she fought. There was constantly breaks and breakbacks, and she really, really fought for her place in this final and could have won it, just like you said. But I think also Aryna, she had the tennis. I think there's no question that she had the tennis to win this match. My question for her was, does she have the mentality to win this match? Because I think we've seen her beat herself a lot in these big matches where, last year against Coco, it was her rackets, and she just lost it on her rackets, in the sense that I remember she kept going back to her team being like, not this racket, not that racket, which was really funny because Jessica kind of did something smaller but similar in this final. But you could see it almost. You could see her kind of try, and I think calming herself down is wrong, but you could see she wouldn't let herself bubble over. You could just see her be like, okay, I lost that point. Give me the ball. I will serve again. You could almost see her on her face, doing that over and over again. And I think it was so great to, for her to get over the line. And I just loved that it was a packed house. There's this I was watching it on ESPN, and they did this like really wide shot, and it was like baby Aryna, and the entirety of Ash was packed, and her going up to her box and everyone's high-fiving her, and Flavor Flav came down to give her a hug. Like, it was such a lovely moment to end a really, really great tennis match. And I'm so glad so many people witnessed that. And like you said, I am so excited about what the final is. One other episode that I would love Nick and I to do is sort of a breakdown of the race. We've mentioned it a little bit throughout the pod, but to do just a dedicated episode on the ATP and WTA race to the finals and then the finals, because I think on the WTA side, it's going to be really interesting to see who makes it to Riyadh.
Did we not already do that? I thought we did that episode with our rankings breakdown very early on in our pod's history.
Yes, really, really early on. I just think we need to revisit it and make it sort of very specific to that, especially now that we're coming up to the finals, to sort of give the audience an idea of what these players are working towards and like where they're going.
And it's what anyone's going to be talking about in like the mainstream tennis discussion for the rest of the season. And so the race situation is very interesting right now, because it looks like I think unless someone has an insane end of season in Beijing and Wuhan, the last two WTA 1000s left, I actually think the lineup is pretty set. So which could be, if you're an American fan, great, because that means there's going to be at least 3 Americans in it. So you never know. But I think that's right.
Yeah, that's why I think this race is going to be especially interesting, considering Qin Wen-zhen, who is going to be playing in the Asian swing. And I don't know, I'm so excited. I'm usually at this point a little bit dead for tennis, and the Asian swing, I'm like kind of in and out of it, and I don't really pay that much attention. But especially on the WTA side, I'm so excited for the Asian swing to see how it goes and how they all fight for the final. But coming back to the US Open, this was just great. I think Aryna Sabalenka is a worthy US Open champion. She's been trying so hard for it, and I also think she has such a great team behind her. They're so fun. Like, watching them on social media has been fun these last few weeks. And her coach always has so she started this trend at the US Open where she signs her coach's head. And then in the final, he had a full-on false tattoo of the tiger on his head. That little things like this, I think, endear players to an audience. And I think she did really well and is a really great champion. Excited for her.
Should be good. I think it's good, and I think she's good for the game. She's a lot of fun, and I definitely think she's got a very good brand to get behind. And I think she's someone who's, if you want to support her, she's worth supporting. I think it would be ridiculous if she never won a US Open with the game that she's got, the fact that she always just won in New York. But she's got it now, and she's the fifth different US Open champion in the last 5 years on the women's side. Let's see how long the US Open keeps this streak up of someone new winning every time. But that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. I had a feeling, I don't know, I was thinking today, does Aryna Sabalenka kind of start doing on hard court what Iga does on clay? Because now she's won 2 Australian Opens in a row. She's finally gotten over the hump of the US Open. Does she start dominating hard court slams? I don't know. But it's interesting going into 2025, seeing what happens. I think happens in Australia.
Yeah, a lot of that's going to depend on Aryna herself and what level she finds, because I think the Grand Slams that she's won, she's been playing a very, very high level. It's going to depend on Iga and if she can make the adjustments she needs, because she wins on hard courts probably more than Aryna outside of slams. And then it's going to depend on what the competition comes up with as well. Like, does Elena Rybakina start feeling better? Does Zheng Qinwen figure out? I mean, she doesn't think anywhere near figuring out Aryna, but she could. Does Oh, there's a few other players in there. What happens if Eva Jovic starts turning up and blasting everyone off the court?
Yeah. Or even someone like, look at Paula Badosa. Like, she's kind of turned around her season where she was almost out of the game in the spring, and now she's getting to a quarterfinals of a Grand Slam. So there's a lot of really great stories coming out of the WTA that I'm excited for going into 2020. Jasmine Paolini, like, it's just, there's a lot happening that I'm excited for. So for the men's, like I said in the beginning, I will come back later on with an edit of who won against. The final is between Jannik Sinner and Taylor Fritz, and we have either a chance to have both on the a sort of double on the WTA and ATP, because Jannik Sinner did win the Australian Open. So does he follow Aryna Sabalenka to win the US Open? And then there's a little double there. Or can Andy Roddick finally just rest and stop being the answer to a trivia question and Taylor Fritz wins? So should be an exciting result either way.
Yeah, I think it'll be exciting either way, and it sets up an interesting story for, well, either for American fans going to future years or for the rest of the season, because I think if Sinner wins, we're kind of locked into the era of Sin Carazas upon us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back to you later. What's happening? What's coming up? On the ATP side, it's Davis Cup. Davis Cup is what's coming up. Really exciting. I think maybe sometime later we'll also do a specific breakdown, just like we'll do about the World Finals, about Davis Cup and Billie Jean King Cup, how important it is to the players. Also, we are in an Olympic year now, but what it means for the players if they want to play the Olympics in LA in 2028. Yes, I can do math. But a lot of people are playing. I think the surprise for me is Novak is playing in the Davis Cup this year. That was the big surprise for me. But there are a lot of people playing. Alcaraz will be there, Ruud, FAA, Draper. Draper is also a surprise for me because he went deep at the US Open, but apparently he is on the roster to play for the UK in Davis Cup. And Short King Mahak is also going to be playing in Davis Cup. So big names playing in Davis Cup this year.
Yeah, and some of them are actually playing just up the road from me in Manchester. So,
are you going?
I don't think I can.
Okay.
I thought about it. I thought about tickets, and then I was like, I looked at my calendar, and I was like, I can't make it. It's not really realistic.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, like, it's going to be packed as well. So it's all week, and I'd need to get time off work, and it's not conducive. I think I'm going to watch electoral tennis when I'm old. I think that's probably what's going to end up happening. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good week to go if you can. And it looks like an interesting group. GB's playing Canada and Argentina, and I think one other, I can't watch, Finland. So that's in that group. Davis Cup, always a bit of fun, especially if your nation is playing. I think that's where a lot of the stakes really come in for that, and that's where a lot of the investment's going to come from. Yeah.
On the WTA side, I just picked, there are a number of events going on, but I just picked the two that I think are the top two.
No, there's only two events going on. So yeah, I'm going to cover them with Anastasia.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So you've got two events going on. One's a 500 in Mexico, in Guadalajara. It was a 1,000 last year. It's been downgraded. I think they were struggling to get people to sign up. Decent field still. I mean, top 4 seeds. Number 1 seed is Danielle Collins. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Number 2 seed, Yelena Ostapenko. You've also got Victoria Azarenka playing, and Caroline Garcia. That's kind of your top 4 taking part. Sloane Stephens is also in the field. There's not a lot of top players in that. I think they're all taking a rest from the US Open, but you can see there's a theme here of a lot of people who went out fairly early in New York, kind of trying to get their season.
Is Sakkari playing? Because she went out first round, no?
No, Sakkari's not defending her title.
Oh, she's not? Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, she's not taking part in that. And then the other event is a 250 in Monastir in Tunisia, the home of Ons Jabeur. But sadly, Ons is not playing. I think she's still injured. Top seed is Elise Mertens, who is the only top 50 player taking part. But it is significant in that it is the only WTA event to take place on the continent of Africa, which is pretty cool and a nice, unique little thing for them.
Yeah. I think I was looking at the list. I mean, I was going off of the WTA website, but it listed Rebecca Skramkova as being in it. And I just wanted to mention her because she was a former player of Fortnite. So definitely someone to look out for. I saw her play qualies at the US Open. So if you're in Tunisia and you want to watch some tennis, I would do that.
It's a great time, apparently. A friend of ours went last year and seemed to really enjoy themselves. So, yeah, great place to visit, apparently.
Great. Awesome. Player of the fortnight. We have come to the end of the podcast, and we always have to end with a player of the fortnight. Well, every fortnight we do. For me, on the WTA, it has to be Brendan Nakashima.
WTA?
No, on the ATP.
So, have we swapped?
Also, Brendan Nakashima is not a WTA player. Yes, my player of the fortnight, ATP, Brendan Nakashima. He is 23 years old. You might know him from kind of his big 2022 run. I think that was his big breakout year. He was in the top 50. He was a top 3 junior. And he won the Next Gen Championships in 2022. He was also in the Next Gen in 21, but he won the 2022 edition. So I think there was a lot of hype going into the 2023 season, but he had a little bit of a dip, loss of form. You didn't really hear from him, but he's back in 24 with a new team and, I think a lot of confidence, and he's finally at the end of this US Open, he's gotten back into the top 50, but he's had some really, really great wins this year. I think I first really started paying attention to him during the clay season in the spring, because I was like, he was having some really great matches, and an American on clay is always so interesting to me because I just feel like sometimes, this was before the time of Clayler, but I feel like sometimes they don't really play so well. So he was playing well, and I've been following him throughout. And coming into the US Open, he beat Taylor Fritz in Montreal. He beat Tommy Paul in Cincinnati, and he got all the way to 4th round. I think that's where he met Zverev at the US Open. And I don't know, he's playing really well, and he's getting me really excited for what the rest of the year will be for him, but also what 2025 will be. I think he's definitely one to watch, and one of the new Americans coming on the scene that will continue this, I think, along with people like Ben Shelton and, will just sort of keep leveling up and hopefully one day, if not today, give us a Grand Slam, a winner at a tennis tournament. So Brendan Nakashima is my guy. He is player of the fortnight for this week.
Nice. Okay. Well, I had a really tough time picking people in terms of, maybe not, maybe not kind of going into this, but like during recording, I was kind of going, oh, do I really want to go with this person? Because I was suddenly very tempted to change my mind and say Ivan Jovic, just because that would thematically fit in with the pod. But to be honest, I think it's still relevant because I think she ended up being the story of the tournament right into the second week for multiple reasons, and that's Karina Mukova. Now, Karolina Muchova, for those of you who don't know, is a former top 10 player. She got to the French Open final last year, lost to Świątek. Could have beaten Świątek in that final. Is regarded as one of the most exciting players to watch by hardcore fans in that she has a lot of options in the way she plays tennis in kind of shot selection and whatnot. As shown by, she got herself on the highlight reel on almost like day one of the US Open, or like the first few days, by hitting a back behind shot, like a shot from like twisting her arm behind her back, getting the ball back in court and somehow winning the point. She has an amazing capacity to basically have an amazing ball control. And there's something about her in New York, because she got to the semi-finals last year and she did again this year. Getting through Osaka in round 2, that was a big win. That was a match that got highlighted before. Then taking out Jasmine Paolini, and then beating Beatrice Haddad in the quarterfinals despite being sick. And then racing to a lead against Jessica Pegula and Havik before getting pegged back. Part of me wonders what a Muchova Sabalenka final would have been like, because Muchova did beat Sabalenka in that French Open run that she had last year. Now, why is this significant? Karolina Muchova didn't play for 9 months, because after this Open she played one more tournament, then dropped out, had wrist surgery, and injuries have been a big part of the story of her career. And didn't play again until we got onto grass and we got to Eastbourne, and she played Eastbourne, Wimbledon, Palermo, and then I think she played Cincinnati and then the US Open. Like, this is like only her 5th tournament back on the pro circuit, and to come out and play a level and really, really well, because like her ranking, she was in danger of nearly dropping out the top 200 or dropping to the bottom of the top 200. And now she's still in the top 50 with nothing to defend until Wimbledon points-wise. So the only way is up for Karolina Muchova, really, because everyone else is going to be fluctuating around her. But yeah, great tennis, great underdog story given her circumstances, despite maybe her top-level talent. And I would say that if you want to watch a tennis player that's going to give you some highlight reel shots, you should look no further than Karolina Muchova on the WTA.
Awesome. Such a great pick. You know, I think that's still the shot she did behind her back is still the shot of the tournament. And she's such a beautiful player to watch. I really love watching her play tennis.
Yeah.
So that's it from Nick and I. Anastasia will come back. I will come back. No need to talk about myself in the third person. I will come back with the men's winner of the US Open in a little short clip. But until then, we will see you later. Thanks for joining us on this US Open journey. It's been really fun. Please follow us on social media. It's been really great. Nick, we are over 1,000 people following us on Threads, which happened during this US Open. And I just wanted to say that because the conversations I've had on there with some people have been really awesome. And I love the back and forth nature of it. So follow us on social media to keep up with what's going on in the tennis world, what's going on with Ground Pass. And yeah. Also, if you haven't, I always forget to do this, even you're supposed to do this all the time. But if you haven't reviewed the podcast, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, review the podcast. It's really helpful on Apple Podcasts as well. You know, give us 5 stars, leave a comment, and we'll read it out on the show. It'll be great.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. This is Anastasia coming back to you after the US Open men's final, and Jannik Sinner is a US Open champion. It wasn't as exciting a match as the women's final was. I think the women's final definitely had a little bit more jeopardy, and it could have gone either way. This was a straight set, dominant win by Jannik Sinner over Taylor Fritz. I think Taylor Fritz definitely played better this tournament. I just recall watching him at Louis Armstrong play against Matteo Berrettini, and it seemed like Matteo Berrettini had never played tennis before. That's what Taylor Fritz's tennis did on that day. And he just didn't bring that sort of energy. He wasn't serving as well. You know, I just listened back to his press conference and he said he wasn't nervous. So don't really know why he didn't play as well. Maybe it was, you know, the 5-set match against Tiafoe that took it out of him. But Jannik Sinner played some great tennis, not his best, but definitely good enough to take it to Taylor and come out in straight sets. You know, he's had, if you're listening to this, you know, maybe you don't know because you're a new fan, but I think it's been in the news a lot. Jannik Sinner came into this tournament with a bit of a doping scandal. He was cleared, obviously. That's why he was able to play in the tournament. But it definitely was something hanging over his head. And I think I'm just impressed by the way he handled it. You know, he's been cleared by the bodies, and that's what I personally am going to go with. But even with that, there was just a lot of stuff hanging around Sinner and discussions. And it was really nice to see him stay focused and come out with a win in the end. So that's the US Open. If you're listening to this, you've obviously listened to the first half of this episode where Nick and I review the tournament and talk about the women's finals as well, where Aryna Sabalenka came out the winner. It's been really fun going through this year of Grand Slams, and this is the final one. We have obviously more of the season left, a few more months left in the season, which we will cover on Ground Pass. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, again, please subscribe to the podcast. Please rate and review us, especially on Apple Podcasts. That helps a lot. It helps a lot of other people find the podcast, especially if they're new tennis fans trying to get into the game. See you on the next episode.